in your radio voice? The
No.
face that she just made at the end of that. So proud of herself. She couldn't have been happier.
Well, no, but I know that we sound different to you guys, as in a good way.
Yeah, hopefully better.
Yeah.
Not just different and bad.
Thank you for, listening and sharing us with everybody you know and leaving us those stellar 5-star reviews and all that, because it's allowed us to upgrade our equipment so that we sound better in your ear holes.
And now we know that people are finding about us organically because it's being recommended. So it works.
Yeah. Yeah, so all your sharing and word of mouth and
Reviews.
yeah, and engaging with us, liking our posts on Instagram. It sounds so simple, but it really does make a difference. So keep it up. And also join our Patreon.
Yeah, we just recorded a great Patreon episode.
Yeah.
Topics included lemurs, the movie Tusk, Cards Against Humanity,
And running trains.
and buttholes for eyes.
Yeah.
So really,
Ran the gamut.
can't go wrong with that.
Uh,
Also, thank God we did that before we're recording this.
yes. Yes. Yeah, so I took the lead again on this topic. I do expect this to be a 2-part series, guys, but we're talking about medical bias. And so the first...
I wish we had the Law and Order dum for after that.
We could probably get our editor to insert that.
Yeah, he's gonna love all this feedback that he's gonna get while we record. Hey, insert this sound. Get me sued by Dick Wolf.
Yeah, so we're talking about medical bias. First episode, I'm talking about medical bias in general, and a little bit about obesity and medical bias.
Mm-hmm.
And our next episode, I plan to discuss racial bias specifically and how that finds its way into medicine. And then I'll talk about ADHD and medical bias in our next episode.
Cool.
So that's the plan.
We'll see how it goes.
Yes. All right, so first of all, there's a couple different, in fact, there's 5 different types of bias.
Oh.
There's implicit bias, which are thoughts or feelings that exist outside of conscious awareness, and thus are difficult to consciously acknowledge and control. For example, especially since 2020...
I was gonna say, I feel like race is probably the number one.
Yes, negative implicit attitudes about people of color may contribute to racial and ethnic disparities in health and healthcare. Mm-hmm. Confirmation bias is a second one. That involves selectively gathering and interpreting evidence to conform with one's previously existing beliefs and ignoring evidence that contradicts those feelings and beliefs.
I've never done that. I do also feel like it's just a very timely conversation to be having, because I think between social media and some of the political stuff that's been going on, this is just conversations about echo chambers and things like that are all very relevant to this topic, in addition to all the medical components with it.
Yeah, for sure. And this episode will come out around International Women's Day as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which, if you don't know, marks the date of the year. It's usually around March 8th, where a woman in 2022 would have to work to earn the same amount as a man in her position earned for all of 2022.
I did not know that's how that date was picked.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, now I'm more mad about it.
Yes. Yeah.
Somehow.
And also, that's the number for white women. For Hispanic women, it's they make about 50 cents on the dollar to a man. Yeah. And I believe Asian women make about 70%, and I think Black women are about the same rate as Asian women.
So not that this is super on topic, but in college, so I was in the business program, which was primarily dominated by men. Most of the professors were men, and we had this adjunct who, I don't remember where he worked, but he was telling us that the the pay gap between men and women was a falsehood.
Eat my whole butthole.
Yep. So he said that, and of course, me being that person, raised my hand and was like, that's not true at all.
Right.
And he was like, well, like, basically, it's a myth, was his statement. And I was like, that's not true. And I had this amazing professor in college. She was so hard, and I never did great in her classes, but she was just so fucking smart.
I love that.
Yeah, she was just amazing. So, she had given us, in one of our, because she taught economics classes, she had given us a copy of a Department of Labor presentation where they were talking about pay disparity. And he was like, well, then you, like, basically said to me, like, giving me homework, like, well, then you can bring in the proof. And I was like, yeah, I've got it. I did it in this person's class. And I brought it in the next class, and he had to, like, retract what he said. I was like, the only fields that it's not accurate, it was, like, teaching and nursing were, like, the very two specific fields. And again, this was, like, you figure the data I had was probably from, like, 2008. So, right. I mean, now it's dated, but at the time, I was like, absolutely not.
Well, and that's still accurate. And the only two professions where that doesn't apply are professions that are female-dominated.
Right.
And professions where men are kind of shamed for
I
going
might be
into
wrong.
those.
It might have been teaching and, like house cleaning or something like, yeah, like Katie just rolled her eyes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was something like that, or like domestic work, some bullshit. But anyway, those were the only two fields or industries in which women and men were making the same. Not that women were making more.
Right, they weren't making up for the disparity in the other fields.
Right. So, yeah, I made that man fix what he said to our class.
Good for you.
And he hated me.
More of that.
Yeah, whatever.
But yeah, so confirmation bias is like when we see it a lot with if you only get your news from a single source. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks who tried to overthrow the U.S. government only get their news from sources that confirm their already held personal beliefs.
Right.
And then, so their news doesn't challenge their worldview at all.
And they probably have a social media feed where they're only friends with people that share their perspectives.
Right.
And then all of the information that they get is targeted to what they already feel.
So, right. So then you end up in this echo chamber of confirmation bias where then it is so much harder to get through to somebody like that.
Right.
Because nothing else around them.
They go right from Wall Street Journal to QAnon. Like,
it is a pipeline.
Like yeah, for sure. It is. Pipeline is a better way to put it. Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Anchoring bias is a third type of bias. That refers to the practice of prioritizing information and data that supports your initial impressions of evidence, even when that initial impression is incorrect.
What is it called again?
Anchoring bias.
Anchoring bias.
For example, attributing a patient's back pain to previously diagnosed osteoporosis without ruling out other potential causes. Ooh. Or engaging in a comprehensive examination of the patient.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And affect heuristic describes when a physician's actions are swayed by emotional reactions instead of rational deliberation about risks and benefits. It's context or patient specific and can come up when a clinician experiences positive or negative feelings towards a patient based on prior experiences with that patient specifically, or with a group that patient belongs to. Right.
I'm just going to be mad this whole episode.
Mm-hmm.
Both episodes.
And then outcome bias refers to the practice of believing that clinical results, good or bad, are always attributable to prior decisions, even if the clinician has no valid reason to think this.
I'm sorry.
Preventing him from assimilating feedback to improve his performance. So a lot of that could be like the clinical results are because the patient is obese,
right?
Not because there's something else going on,
right,
that could be causing that.
If your cholesterol was high and your doctor accused you of lying about what you were eating,
right?
Yeah,
for example.
So.
The New England Journal of Medicine did a review of studies involving physicians, nurses, and other medical professionals, which found that healthcare providers' implicit racial bias was associated with diagnostic uncertainty for Black patients, negative ratings of their clinical interactions, less patient-centeredness, poor provider communication, undertreatment of pain, views of Black patients as less medically adherent than white patients, and other ill effects. One study found that those biases are learned and then reinforced by cultural exposure and interactions, finding 48.7% of U.S. medical students reported having been exposed to negative comments about Black patients by attending or resident physicians.
What percentage?
48.7%.
Jesus Christ.
And those students demonstrated significantly greater implicit racial bias in year 4 than they had in year 1.
That's extreme. That's a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
So that just demonstrates that the intensity of medical biases, whether based on race, sexual orientation, gender identity, or immigration status, or religion, is often learned from older medical professionals.
Yeah, because it's like if you didn't have it coming in, you're certainly going to have it when you leave.
Right, who are literally teaching new doctors and nurses how to provide care to patients.
Yeah. How to provide biased care to patients.
Right. Gender bias in healthcare is a global problem that's been recognized by the WHO and has significant negative effects on medical diagnosis and quality of healthcare women receive across the globe, leading to substantial delays in diagnosis, and which can also cause misdiagnosis and death. And just to be clear, when I say women, I do mean AFAB individuals, since globally, I think a lot of trans folks struggle for visibility in the US, but
context.
We'll kind of get into it, but basically, like, globally speaking, your genitals determine your healthcare quality.
Yeah.
And so when I'm saying women, I just mean people who have female genitals regardless of how they identify, because that's how, more often than not, medicine identifies those people. Gender differences are innately woven into human history and therefore into medical history. Medicine has absorbed and enforced socially constructed gender divisions throughout time. So, like, for example, in the Christian Bible, and I believe it's also in the Torah, in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, there's like a rule that after you give birth, a woman has to wait a certain amount of time before she's considered clean again to go into the temple. It's 40 days if you have a male child and 60 days if you have a female child. So you're actually less clean if you have a female and give birth to a female. So, like, and realistically, like, if you look at the reason for it, in ancient Judaism, women just wouldn't go to temple if they were on their period. So post-birth, you can bleed for up to 6 weeks after you give birth.
I feel like, ooh, I think I'm on my period again this week. I have a really short cycle.
And the reason for that, though, was also because they would clean themselves before they went into the temple. So you don't want somebody in this communal bath who's just free bleeding, because they didn't have tampons or Diva cups back then.
What if you wanted to go in and pull out your lambskin and tampon and throw it at somebody? Hypothetically. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm just going to be disruptive this whole episode.
Oh my God. Unrelated, but still somehow related, guys. We have an LLC that we formed for this podcast, and I had to veto Garet's first suggestion for the name of that LLC.
And when I said it, I was serious.
Yeah.
It was a serious recommendation.
And what have we learned since then, though?
It's, like Katie was right. It stemmed from a joke that we made about how we were mad at men, so we were going to throw use tampons
or
at them.
lambskin tampons.
We were going to call it ragtag, and I thought that was great. So that's what I would do to get out of going to
You would play ragtag.
temple.
Yeah.
Church.
But so there was like a hygiene reason for that rule, but the fact that that rule changed based on the sex of the baby that you gave birth to just indicates that there was having a female baby made you less clean than having a male baby, basically. So anyway, I mean, and the Torah goes back 5,000 years, so it's a really long time. And so the historical divisions in medicine and society have traditionally ascribed power and dominance to men. Women are historically subordinated in politics, wealth, education, and modern scientific medicine has evolved as a profession and institution in these exact conditions. So male dominance and the perceived superiority of the male body was cemented into the very foundation of medicine as far back as ancient Greece. So consider how ancient Greco-Roman statues depict naked men on the reg, and they're like super muscular and they're like really detailed depictions of these men, but the women are never depicted in that same way. They're never depicted in action poses.
Right.
If they're in an action pose, they're serving.
Right, or they're just like laying with their boobs out.
Right, which like same, but that's me living my best life.
Right.
Not as a subject of a study.
Also, I feel like I read a headline, something about like there was a reason why, again, this isn't super relevant, but there was a reason why all the old statues and paintings of men had small weens.
Yeah, it's because they didn't they didn't tie the size of your wiener to your actual masculinity. They tied it to like how well read you were, how like intelligent you were, and
so a big dong meant you were dumb.
Yeah, because that's all you had to prove that you were manly.
Isn't that so interesting?
Yeah. Yeah, I almost minored in art history. I just never bothered to look up the graduation requirements. I need like one more class and I would have minored in art history.
I love the thought of you like
casually
delivering your final project and it's the Mr. Bean painting that's been
basically.
Or you just talking. So the reason the Flappy Doodle is smaller on this man is because
there was an episode a while ago now where I went on a very angry tangent about the depiction of villains in Disney movies, which was for a history class, but not.
I think that got cut.
It did get cut.
Yeah, it was
it hurt my feelings, but
hurtful but fair. Hurtful.
But that probably would have been used in my art history.
Yeah.
Like major
instead
dissertation thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it just would have been the Mr. Beaning of Disney movies.
I love making Mr. Bean a verb. The Mr. Beaning. Oh my god. Oh, that's good.
So
Greco-Roman.
Yeah, the Greco-Roman blah blah blah.
Women laying around.
I mean, obviously art is very different than medicine, but Leonardo da Vinci and 15th century doctors were both buying bodies from grave robbers to study them, and Da Vinci did the Vitruvian Man, he never did a Vitruvian woman.
Yeah.
So, and the Vitruvian Man was used as like the standard
right
for anatomy studies.
Right.
For still today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there's not a woman's counterpart to that.
Right.
So one study is called, quote, Brave Men and Emotional Women, a theory-guided literature review on gender bias in healthcare and gendered norms towards patients with chronic pain, unquote.
Oof. It's a mouthful.
Yes. InternationalWomen'sDay.com noted that even this title reaffirms the gender stereotypes that are inherent in
I
medicine.
thought it was to be ironic.
No. The study noted that women's pain responses are affected by menstrual cycle, pregnancy, oral contraceptive use, confirming that hormones are related to a pain response. And despite this, women dominate the most women dominate most chronic pain diagnoses, but there's also evidence that opioid receptors behave differently in men and women. But more studies need to be done on how those are affected by your hormones. And they don't do those studies on women.
And again, 50% of the population is impacted by this.
Yes.
And the whole medical community is like, oh,
that's hard.
We're close enough with men, right?
Mm-hmm. Also, gender role expectations often affect how a patient reports their own experience. Psychologically, that can be linked to the idea that we respect people in healthcare inherently. Usually, like, you kind of want to, because you respect them, you can unintentionally almost want to impress them by either minimizing your symptoms and denying how severe your pain could be, or picking up on body language cues of your caregivers to alter, like, because you don't want to feel like a burden.
Yeah. Or judgment, or...
And this study was, like, one of the things that they did, they had they told participants, like, how long something should... Basically, like, how long you can withstand something, how many seconds between men and women. And they said, like, well, the average man can handle, like, 30 seconds of this before they have to, like, say, no, that's too painful. And the average woman can handle about 15 seconds of this. And when they told the participants that, most of the participants...
fell within that range.
Right, based on their sex. But if they told if they told both groups, yeah, you'll last about 30 seconds. Everybody lasts about 30 seconds. Then everybody lasted 30 seconds. So it's like you...
It's like your own internal implicit bias.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm not supposed to last any longer than this, so why should I put up with it, basically, which is fair. But, like...
Yeah, I would also be taking that as a challenge. Like, well, then I'm going to last till 40 seconds. Fuck you!
I thought the same thing, actually. But medical providers also have those same biases and stereotypes. So a doctor that believes that men are generally tougher and able to withstand more pain than women can also take that as, well, if a man is complaining of pain, then it's serious. If a woman's complaining of pain, well, of course she's complaining of pain. Women are weaker. Yes. And I wrote in here, as Garet knows, this can also make it extremely easy to dismiss a woman's complaints of pain or discomfort.
Ask me about my IUD experience.
You want to tell me about your IUD experience?
Oh, I was, like, saying that as a joke. But yeah, it's like, you like, so in my experience, anytime I had to go in for, I mean, we're all about oversharing. So I had
We already did 4 episodes on hormones.
That's true. I had a period of time where I was testing positive for HPV, which was, like, super common. And anybody that's had HPV at any point knows you can, like, randomly test positive and then randomly test negative for a few years and then test positive again. So I was seeing a provider who, this is the same provider who told me immediately without a single thought that I did not have polycystic ovarian. Also told me that if I tested positive for HPV, I then had to come in every 6 months for what they called an invasive pap smear, which I don't know. I'm assuming some of our listeners have had colposcopies. I've had one, as has Katie, and had vastly different experiences because Katie's providers told her ways to cope and avoid extra discomfort.
Yeah, how to cope with the copo.
Yep. Mine turned basically every pap smear into a colposcopy, where they would use the pap smear to scrape the surface of my cervix every 6 months. So I then went to a different provider at some point and started explaining this and kind of got, like, narrowed eyes for a second. And she paused before saying anything to me, and she said, "That's not a standard of care that I'm familiar with." And then we moved on. I also had, IUDs. And before any of those types of procedures, I would ask about the discomfort level and be told some people experience mild cramping. you can take an Advil before you come in. Let me tell you, an Advil isn't going to do shit.
There was a TikTok video I saw of I believe it was a gynecologist demonstrating on I was going to say a dummy, but like an anatomy replica of a cervix, which is bigger than I thought it was. I don't know why I thought it was like the size of a Cheerio. I guess it's bigger than that. This whole time I thought it was itty bitty. It's not.
Of all the things, I was not expecting Kate to say a Cheerio.
I thought it was so small.
Yeah. Oh, God.
But it's not. It's like the size of a quarter, but puffy.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen one, guys. But there was a TikTok video of the provider demonstrating and showing the tools that they used, and they fucking pierce it.
Yeah.
With this like
for the colposcopy
talent thing. No, to put in an IUD.
Oh, okay. So when I had an IUD done, so let me put it this way. Okay. So I had polycystic ovarian, but my provider wouldn't acknowledge that I had polycystic ovarian. So he had told me that, like, at that point I was married. Really the best way for like long-term birth control, because I didn't have any plans of getting pregnant anytime soon, was an IUD. And he recommended Mirena, which for anybody that's dealt with polycystic ovarian is a terrible combination.
Yeah.
With polycystic ovarian. So I get the pre-auth. My doctor's telling me it's a good idea. I go in for the Mirena, and they had told me to take a fucking Advil beforehand. Like an idiot. So I was offered, the nurse said, "Do you want to hold my hand?" And, I don't want to say like I have a high pain tolerance, but like I can handle discomfort. Yeah. And I kind of laughed and was like, "No, thank you." And then 2 seconds later was like gripping the ever-loving fuck out of her hand because I thought I was going to pass out. I did not watch a video on how IUDs were done until after I had it done, and was horrified because they were literally taking like forceps and like pulling open the cervix and forcing this object through and then opening the little umbrella. It was like crazy to me. So they finished that and just left. Careful getting up. And left.
So different than my colpo experience.
And I sat up and thought, like, okay, not a big deal. Like, I survived. I'm through the worst part of it. I stood up and almost passed out alone in this room, like, bleeding. It was just, like, the most wild. And then you fast forward, like, 6 months I've had this thing, and I'm getting cystic acne that I've never had before. I'm getting male pattern hair growth. Like, I'm noticing, like, a change in my body hair. So I called and I was like, "Hey, I don't think this is a good fit for me." "Oh, that's okay. We'll do the Paragard, the copper one." "Okay. We can change them in the same appointment." Okay. So I go in and they swapped it in the same appointment. And I left and I spent the whole afternoon like with dry heaves on and off because it was just so painful afterwards.
Yeah.
And then had terrible side effects from the Paragard. So after a month, they made me come in for like a recheck to make sure it was seated properly. And I saw a different provider, and there was two things that blew my mind. The first thing is the first fucking thing she said to me, which I mentioned in our other episode, was, "Has anybody talked to you about polycystic ovarian?" And I almost screamed when she said it.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, I brought it up to this asshole 6 years ago, and he told me I was wrong." And then the other thing she told me was that the Paragard wasn't seated correctly, so I really didn't have any protection. And I just, like, stared at her like I was buffering. Like, I just couldn't. So I was like, "Can you just take it out?" And she was like, "Well, there's this other one that's better for I was like, "Nope. Take it out, and I'm going back on the pill, and I'm never doing this again. And I will never get another IUD." Which, don't get me wrong, like, it's definitely a good choice for some people. I'm not some people, and it's not a good choice for me, and was not worth getting, and overall was a bad experience. But it was bullshit that every time I went in for something like that, I was told I would have mild cramping. No, if I'm at the point where I have to hold somebody's hand and I'm in a cold sweat and I almost pass out after, somebody who's like not a huge baby, no, that's not acceptable.
Oh, totally.
I at one point refused to have another colposcopy unless they were willing to give me a local anesthetic because they wanted me to have another one. And I was like, well, then I'm going to need like lidocaine or something. There was only one provider in the whole practice who would do it and wasn't available. So I refused. I was like, this is
weird.
Yes. Because like, hey, this is a painful thing. And these men that are doing it, even the women that were doing it, aren't acknowledging that it's a painful thing. And it's shitty.
Yeah.
Because then it turns into like me being a baby. Me just being like
right.
unable
exactly.
to tolerate it. Not that it's
they don't
actually
take it seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
When in reality it's like, hey, let's swap for a second and I'm gonna scrape the fuck out of your cervix.
Yes.
And then you can let me know how uncomfortable you are.
Right. Let me punch holes in your uvula in the back of your throat and like let me know
how that feels.
Like just hold still, please.
Yes.
Don't move.
And that was the other thing too. You need to relax your legs. I literally can't relax anything in my whole body.
That is so wild because I've had 2 colpos and both times like the nurse stayed in the room with me until I got off the table. And they were like, okay, like just take a deep breath and we'll sit you up and like helped me sit up and then.
Which I hear this and I'm glad that was it. But I'm also mad.
Well, it's all like, which is why like every time you told me one of these stories, I was like, I don't understand.
She would look at me like I was crazy. Like it was, let me tell you about this crazy dream have you ever had a dream that you.
Literally though, because and that's the practice that I've always gone to. So I never had this experience, thankfully, but it is one of those things where I'm like, thank God, because what the fuck?
And not to like further derail this, but I've just had so many bad gynecologist experiences. The first provider that I saw in that office, I was like 16 and I went because I wasn't having a regular period because I had polycystic ovarian. Not that anybody fucking talked to me about it, but anyway. So I went, I went for like my first visit. She did a kind of rough pelvic exam. And I had said to her multiple times that I was like not sexually active. And she kept asking me in like different ways if I had had sex. And I kept telling her like, no. And then I got to the point where I was like offended because like I've told you like 4 times now that I haven't had sex. She does this rough pelvic exam. Not that there's like, I'm not, turning this into a judgment thing about hymens, but like you can tell I haven't had sex. And she did this like rough pelvic exam. And then going forward, I had to start asking for a pediatric speculum instead of a normal, because it was uncomfortable because they were doing rough pelvic exams.
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
And she, like, they can give you, I think it's like a progesterone pill to like induce your period because she wanted to like get me on a regular cycle and she was putting me on the pill. And she gave me these instructions. So like I had this rough pelvic exam. You've been questioning my honesty this whole time. She rattles off directions and leaves and gives me this bag of pills, and I took them incorrectly. And then I called because I was having this problem, and she was like, I told you that you were supposed to do X, Y, and Z. Girlfriend, I am a child. Like, I'm a child in this office. This was like kind of a traumatic experience for me because you hurt me and didn't believe me.
No, I didn't have a pelvic exam until I was 20 because that's when I had sex for the first time.
Let's continue. I'm just going to get more mad at every time I've gone to a doctor's office. Oh, Jesus Christ.
So as we mentioned a little bit earlier,
where I went on my fucking tirade. Buckle your seatbelts because there's going to be more. That's why Katie had to cover this because I was going to get too mad and couldn't.
Fair. So yeah, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's like these gaps in medical research, like the Vitruvian man thing, because researchers believe that males were the ideal test subject because they did not have menstrual cycles and can't become pregnant. Although we know that these exact conditions, and although we now know that having a menstrual cycle and the ability to become pregnant is a significant biological difference between the sex, can also influence how diseases, drugs, and therapies affect people, it doesn't change the fact that almost all of our medical research is built upon a very white guy foundation, I wrote.
Yeah, fair. Yep.
This is often referred to as, quote, gender blindness, unquote, in studies, but when it comes to medicine, gender blindness in my opinion, seems to be a reckless attempt at avoiding complications that 50% of the population has to deal with, even if the researchers are grossed out by tampons.
And I feel like it's not blindness, it's blinders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're literally just pretending that half the people on the planet are the same as the other half, but then also acknowledging that they're completely different.
Yeah. A great example of that, actually, of that blinder thing is, have you seen Hidden Figures?
No, I haven't. That's the one
really
with the rocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's very good, but there's a scene where the main character, she gets pulled into like the NASA room to do math for them. It's Catherine. Fuck, I can't remember her name. They named a building after her at NASA, but she gets pulled into this NASA room, but the only bathroom for quote colored women at the time was a mile and a half away from where she was working. So she had to like hold her pee for as long as she could. And then she couldn't take a bike across the campus because those were only for white workers at NASA. So she had to run across campus in heels every day. And then she got in trouble because it was raining one day. And so she came back like soaked, and the boss guy played by Field of Dreams guy. Kevin Costner, yeah. He's like, where do you go every day? And she like had a meltdown, and she was like, well, guess what? Like, I can't just pee anywhere. So like,
I really wish that her meltdown involved your meltdowns where you tell somebody to eat your butthole.
maybe. I mean, it's a Disney movie, so maybe they edited
version.
It. Yeah. That's the director's cut. But as a result of this blindness in medicine, this gender blindness, there's a lot of women who no longer trust medical professionals or medical organizations due to these negative experiences that they've had or that their family members have had, which then can lead to women avoiding necessary health screenings and care like regular pap smears, mammograms, things that are proven to reduce death and complicated outcomes, and increase survivability with early screenings.
Yes.
Even like colonoscopies people will avoid. And
my blood pressure is higher when I go to the doctor, and I have to tell them every time. You can recheck it after I'm here for a while, but when I'm so anxious when I come in, even if I'm comfortable with the provider. Yeah. I've just had so many bad experiences that I'm like, great, like, what are you going to do this time? Tell me I'm lying, make me experience something you're going to tell me isn't painful that's painful. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah. And additionally, gender bias in healthcare can increase alienation and the lack of regular health screenings, which can also increase the risk of abuse, neglect, and death of women and girls around the world who are in unsafe households. But to be clear, this is not limited to third world countries. This happens in America and the Western world every day. In 2022, 71,000 Black girls went missing. So,
and they label them as runaways instead of just investigating it. Because everybody's trash.
So
when I say everybody's trash, I mean men. I'm sorry, men or whatever.
Historically, women were described as the inverse of men, and defined by their difference from the male form. Women had male genitalia turned inside out, according to Aristotle.
I mean, I feel like he's not totally wrong, because it is just kind of, for Aristotle's time, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe at some point he just, like, poked his wiener in to see what would happen.
He was like, what if I just go, what if I just hold my breath for a really long time? If anything, I feel like it would be that the men's is if it just fell out.
I mean, I guess.
If the flappy doodles flapped.
Yeah, but we don't have balls, I guess, unless our labia.
I'm thinking, rogue. Yeah. I was thinking more like ovaries. Like your ovaries just fall into your labia and then
hang.
And then hang out. Garet teaching anatomy.
Wow. That is like Ren and Stimpy.
Oh my god. Yes, you're welcome.
The only recognized difference women possess that had no direct counterpart in the male form in like Aristotle's time and whatever was the uterus, and thus the study of women's biology centered around her ability to bear and raise children. So when you reduce your specialness to a single organ, it's easy to say that women have to be responsible for raising children because they have the organ that's needed to grow the child in the first place. And therefore, we have the history of the word hysteria, which was a term that was used over the course of centuries and is still used today to describe any sort of outburst or unexplained pain a woman may experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm usually describing it as something that was really funny.
Well, right, but that's...
And even then, I try not to use it because I associate it with that and it makes me
And
mad.
that's like within, like, since 1950 that's been the use of that word. That wasn't the use of the word before then. Right. It was a reason to have somebody committed if they were hysterical.
Right, hysteria, yeah.
And also, again, just note that not all women have a uterus, not all people with a uterus or people who menstruate are women, but historically, medicine has conflated biological sex with gender identity.
Right.
So, how does this all manifest with modern medical care? Women are more like... How you doing, Tony? Bad.
End of sentence.
Women are more likely to be offered minor tranquilizers and antidepressants than analgesic, aka actual painkiller medication, pain meds. Women are less likely to be referred to a specialist to further diagnostic investigations than men. Women's pain is much more likely to be seen as having an emotional or psychological cause and therefore is imagined instead of a bodily or biological cause. And women are predominantly sufferers of chronic diseases that begin with pain, but before the pain is taken seriously as a symptom of a possible disease, it first needs to be validated and believed by a medical professional. And that is the point where the medical bias really leads to negative patient outcomes.
Right. Also, women are more likely, like, women live longer than men, but are more likely to become disabled than men.
Whatever biases and discrimination that women in general experience, that experience is heightened and much more severe when the patient is Black, Asian, Indigenous, Latin, or ethnically diverse, when their access to regular healthcare is restricted, either by their abuser or just where they live, and or if, you know, you're in the U.S. and don't have fucking healthcare.
Yeah, and can't afford it. Yeah.
This is a shithole country. And when the patient does not identify with gender norms, medicine ascribes... If a patient does not identify with the gender norms that medicine ascribes to biological womanhood. So non-binary folks or trans folks are often like doubly discriminated against and affected by negative medical bias. Women are still today, in 2023, excluded from clinical research on the grounds that female hormones fluctuate too much and upset the consistency of results. This means that medications...
That's what we want to know about.
Right, exactly.
So you get it.
This means that medications marketed to both sexes are not necessarily great for women to use or can result in more severe side effects for women because we are not included in the early stages of trials and researchers don't have the funding, ability, or interest in tweaking medications to properly treat each patient. This could be considered a commentary on the industrialized capitalist medical complex, but we're not going to scream about that too much today.
Lies.
Or else I'll end up with a tinfoil hat on, and this podcast will turn into something that Garet didn't sign up for.
Or that Garet jumped into the driver's seat and drove it there because she's furious. But even, like, as a pregnant person trying to find information, like, okay, can I take this medication? Half the time it's, no, I don't know. And I asked my provider about it, and they were like, yeah, nobody wants to test anything on pregnant people, so they don't. You have a headache? Good luck.
Yep.
Something's wrong with you? Better wait until you're done nursing.
And I understand, you know, the hesitancy.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I would want to volunteer to be pregnant and then be tested on.
Right, and I think I think it falls under this umbrella of not wanting to test on. Like, I feel like if they were including women in this, there would be, it would go with this different approach of, okay, let's find ways to do this where
Correct.
it's safe, or find ways to do it where it's like something we can actually duplicate or execute.
Yeah,
or,
if our baseline was including female hormone fluctuations
right.
for a monthly cycle in
Right.
our studies, then it wouldn't be as difficult to extrapolate that data to a
Right.
pregnancy.
Or, like, are there women who, like, they can give you an HCG dose? Like, can we do that to try and replicate certain things? So, yeah, I just feel like there's no, it falls under this, like, we don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Silly.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on to obesity and medical bias. This is a quicker section, so this will be rounding out our episode today. I read a paper that was published back in 2001. The opening line of this journal's article was, quote, "It has been said that obese persons are the last acceptable targets of discrimination," unquote. This article also noted that obesity is frequently viewed as a social liability in Western society rather than as a health condition or a differently shaped body. And that was in 2001.
And if anybody's read the changes that the American Pediatric Association just made for obese children,
Yes.
you will scream.
Yes. We'll talk about that at the end.
Okay.
Just note that obesity was classified as a disease in the U.S. In 2013. So this article came out in 2001.
Yeah.
But regarding medical bias, this article noted that 400 physicians were mailed anonymous questionnaires and asked to identify 5 diagnostic categories and social characteristics of patients to which they responded negatively. 1/3 of the sample listed obesity as one of those conditions, making it the 4th most commonly listed category, ranking behind only drug addiction, alcoholism, and mental illness.
Why is mental illness included in that even?
Well, maybe this will answer. Obesity was associated with poor hygiene, noncompliance, dishonesty, and hostility. And I think if you have like a severe bipolar or schizophrenic
They have
condition,
associations,
yeah, and even severe depression, you can have poor hygiene from that.
Right, or
and-
that like you're not totally lucid, so you can't possibly be answering questions.
But they included obesity with that same thing, like drug addiction, you're non-compliant, you're dishonest, you're hostile, blah, blah, blah. Researchers who compiled the data from that questionnaire concluded the doctors surveyed exhibited overwhelming Protestant austere ethical values, which emphasize self-discipline, persistence in the face of adversity, and achievement,
and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
characteristics that physicians generally believed were low or absent in overweight or obese and alcoholic patients. Another study of 318 family doctors found that 2/3 reported their obese patients lacked self-control, and 39% called their obese patients lazy.
Whoa! 39?
Yeah, 66% said that they lack self-control.
Fuck.
A study of healthcare professionals specializing in nutrition found 88% of those respondents believed obesity was a form of compensation for lack of love or attention. 88%. 70% attributed the cause of obesity to emotional problems.
What even? So you're literally walking in the door and they're like, oh.
Right. Obese patients are often categorized as unintelligent, unsuccessful, inactive, and weak-willed, despite the realities of how those people live their lives. I'd like to point out that I am clinically obese, and I am an attorney, and successful, and I am physically active.
And suck my butthole!
Yeah, and I'm prone to outbursts.
The clinical definition.
Maybe a little hostile.
Hostility.
Critically, studies have also shown that overweight and obese women especially are more likely to cancel or delay seeking medical care for fear of being weighed and trying to avoid the embarrassment and lecturing about their weight.
Yeah.
Even if your weight isn't the reason you're going to the doctor.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Like I have hypertension and high cholesterol, which are both genetic. And even with lifestyle changes, Not that weight is like, obviously, we're having that conversation, but that's not like the be all and end all of health and metrics.
Right. I mean, conversely, my blood pressure is 120/80 and is steady no matter pretty much what I do.
And now I can say, suck my butthole.
Yes, my cholesterol is always perfect.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Like,
and I'm a chubby. I have chubby.
That's okay. I'm a professional eater right now.
But you know, like, you're one of the healthiest eaters I know.
Like,
and you exercise
stopped eating
always.
meat. Right. Like, at the point that I was going to this appointment, I had lost about 50 pounds. And, like, obviously had been seeing my primary the whole time. And, like, hey, you know, these things aren't changing despite all of these other lifestyle changes I've made. So clearly that's not the problem.
Yeah.
And not that they were still good changes to make. And, like, I know that they have other impacts on my health that are still good. But, you know, it didn't fix these two things that are things that naturally happen to my body because of my genetics. And I went in and the doctor said to, I think she was a PA, was asking me about, like, how much water I drink, what I'm eating, you know, all this other stuff. And she ended the appointment with telling me if I could drop a few pounds before the next appointment, that would be great, which was in like 3 weeks.
The great thing about my body is as soon as I tell it that we have to lose weight by a certain time, my body says, put it in your butt.
I love the thought of you talking to your body and your body saying that.
Yeah. Just absolutely.
I hear what you say. I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Yeah, so it was just like...
Just Will Forte. Put it in your butt.
McGruber.
Yeah.
And that same doctor, the same physician, you know, this PA was reporting to, is the one that called me at fucking 8 o'clock at night and told me I was lying about what I was eating.
We knew each other when that happened.
Yeah.
Like,
it was the night before I got my first COVID vaccine, which is why I went.
Right.
Was to get my, like, the letter that I had pre-existing conditions. And she told me I was clearly not being honest about what I was eating.
Yeah, that was wild.
With 6-month-old blood work.
I was so confused when you texted that information to me because you were like, I just got a call, and I was like, do you have cancer? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why are you getting a call at 8 o'clock at night?
And, like, she, like, yelled at me on the phone.
Yeah.
And I have a very...
My doctor calls me ever. I've gotten one phone call, actually, from my physician himself. And, like, it was after my bad day. But, like, that's the only time I've ever gotten a call from my doctor.
Like, my primary...
And it was business hours.
Right. My primary has called me, like, 2 times, maybe. And one was, like, right after I left an appointment.
Yeah.
And she was like, you know what? I thought about it, and I want to change our plan for this and do this instead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just, like, really jarring to me, and I just completely shut down and, like, cried when I got off the phone, because I was like, I can't believe I just got yelled at like a child.
Right.
And I'm not lying. And it's funny, because, like, I saw, like, not that it has anything to do with anything, but I went to an acupuncture appointment later, and I was, like, talking to the woman that was doing the acupuncture, and she was like, you're a healthy person. Like, that one metric does not define, like, everything about your health.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, logically.
Right.
Logically, I'm right on board with you.
I like it better when you say it, though.
Yeah.
Because my brain says, put it in your butt.
Yes. That's what happens.
So, I was listening to this episode of an NPR podcast that's linked in our show notes.
That outburst was not me.
I wonder if that even got picked up.
I wonder if it did.
But so this is an NPR episode. It's linked in our show notes, which is where I got the 2013 number of when obesity was classified as a disease. And the CDC in 2013 reported that 42% of Americans at that time were experiencing obesity.
Which, so, if you're going by the BMI chart.
Well, okay. So frequently classifying obesity relies on BMI, which is problematic. That metric was designed by excluding racial and ethnic minority groups to determine someone's healthy body weight, but is still applied to those groups.
Yep. Universally.
Uniformly, yeah. It's technically a screening tool, not a diagnostic tool. So
that's funny.
Yeah, but it's used as a diagnostic tool.
Yes. And all of my paperwork forever will say obesity on it.
And so what makes it a disease, though, right?
Right.
And not just a condition.
Right.
There's actually pathophysiology in the body that governs how much we eat and how much we store. And there are different specific pathways in the brain which tell your body to eat more, store more, eat less, store less. So treatments for obesity now are actually focused on the brain and how the brain processes and treats food and weight, which is why we're seeing a lot of people using like Ozempic and insulin
Trying to approach
medications
it from something other than diet and exercise.
because it affects your hormones.
Yeah.
And your hormones affect your brain, and
Yep.
it affects how your brain processes that information.
Yep.
So, so that's why it's called a disease, but old habits die hard, and BMI is quick, fast, and dirty, and they use it everywhere. I mean, fuck, they use it in gym classes here. So
It gets used everywhere.
Yes.
Like, and even like, so when I lost weight, like I've always weightlifted. So my BMI is always higher because I'm like, I have a lot of muscle mass. So it would like skew my BMI.
when I did Weight Watchers, you wouldn't qualify for a free membership until you hit your goal weight and maintained it for 6 weeks. But your goal weight had to be within the healthy BMI range for your height. And for me, that meant that I had to be 140 pounds.
Yes.
And at my lowest, I was at like 155 pounds.
Yep.
And let me tell you, there was not another 15 pounds on me to leave.
Well, yeah.
Like,
I mean,
there
at my lowest
was
weight,
there's nowhere else it could come from
Yeah.
without me actually becoming emaciated.
Yeah.
Yet, my BMI was technically still
Overweight.
over 30.
Yep.
Or 25, I think.
Yeah. I think it's like 25 to 29.9 is like overweight. Because even at my
'Cause
lowest,
25,
I was
20
still
to 25 is healthy.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I was still over 25. I was technically still considered overweight.
I'm supposed to be 110 to like 135 pounds.
Yes.
If I was 100, like at my absolute lowest, I was 155, somewhere in there.
There was a scandal several years ago. There's always a scandal, but with The Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
And the winner of one season.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
People were like freaked out.
Yes. Even the trainers, like when
Yes.
they revealed her at the finale, they were like, oh my God.
What did we do?
She was 105 pounds.
Yep.
Because she's 5'4", and that was the lowest healthy weight that
Mm-hmm.
she could be. And there was like a massive uproar about it. Like, that was dangerous. You shouldn't be like glorifying that. And it's like, well, that's
what you're doing.
That's exactly, and that's just it. And she was like, that was like, it was the lowest end, but I wasn't underweight.
Yep.
And that was the parameters. You can't be underweight at the finale.
Yep.
You have to be within that BMI range. And subsequently, she hasn't regained all of the weight, but she's regained a decent amount. So now she's probably like 175 pounds and maintaining it comfortably and
Yes.
living a normal life.
Yes.
But in any event, that's our BMI
Rage.
tangent. And so,
I could rage about it all day.
but using BMI can cause that tunnel vision in providers and prevent doctors and nurses from considering other possible causes of a complained condition, like high cholesterol, for
100%,
example.
Yeah. Which PCOS can also cause high blood pressure and high cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
Side note.
Only 1% of persons who qualify for medications to treat obesity are actually given access to those medications.
1%?
Yeah. Yep. Despite the fact that the American Medical Association has recognized obesity as a disease, obesity is still treated as chosen as a lifestyle choice, or still treated as a lifestyle choice. And that belief is wholly contradicted by the science on the issue. We know it's a brain-gut pathway communication issue, and treating it as a choice, like what you wear to work each day, is reckless. But it's such a deeply held belief that it infiltrates all levels of medical care and the dialogue around it. Consider, we don't have diabetes lifestyle clubs where you pay a monthly fee to show up once a week and get your blood sugar checked by a stranger and go into a room with a bunch of other people with diabetes to share your insulin hacks.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's ridiculous.
We don't have cancer clubs where you pay a monthly fee and get weighed and your food journals checked and your success is measured based on whether what you do those 6 other days of the week is reflected in your weekly check-ins. Is your tumor growing? Did you I guess you didn't eat organic this week. Try better next week. But
We're
when it
posting progress pics on the page for the cancer group.
Right. But when it comes to obesity, even though it's classified as a disease, it's treated by society as a very personal issue and a personal problem, and one that falls solely onto the patient to solve, more or less on their own.
And, like, also, like, your genetics can impact what types of foods you crave and how you store fat and...
Or having ADHD, craving fucking
Yes.
carbs all the
Yes.
time.
It can even, like, genetics can even impact, like, what was the other thing that they were saying on the daily when I was listening to it? They were saying the types of foods you crave. Oh, your appetite.
Mhm.
Like, how big your appetite is can also be dictated by genetics. So, like,
Yes.
what?
Yeah. So, anyway, that's all I have for this episode. We'll take a break. We'll have lunch. We'll eat a
I'll
big
rage.
lunch. Yeah.
I'll keep raging.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm going to be mad for days.
I mean, I brought a salad for lunch, but that wasn't just because of the obesity stuff.
No.
It just was easy for me to pack up.
Yeah, the pregnant version of me is like, salad? No, thank you.
I know.
I normally love salad.
I saw the leftover pasta in your fridge, and I was like,
That actually wasn't mine last night. I had pizza. I did put salad on top of my pizza,
Okay.
which was a trick to get myself to eat something that was a vegetable,
Whatever.
but it worked.
I put avocado on my salad to trick myself to eat the salad. So.
Yes. Yes. If I just hide these little things in there. I took out mac and cheese for myself.
Nice.
Yeah. So we will continue this absolutely enraging conversation next week.
Yes.
With part 2 of Medical Bias and Rage, brought to you by Garet and Katie.
Whee!
Because I will keep screaming forever. And I'm sure next week I'll have more fun, traumatic medical stories to share.
Probably.
Because as time goes on, I'm like being reminded of other things that I've been told that make me mad.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh.
Remember to give yourself some grace, and I mean, I really do recommend writing down your questions before you go into the doctor and having that with you and in your hand.
Yes.
Just so that you at least remember to ask the question.
That's good advice.
Even if you don't remember what the response was entirely, you know that you mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just remember to take notes.
Take notes and know that health metrics don't define who you are as a person.
Yeah. And we'll see you next Thursday.
Keep screaming.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll be here next Thursday with a brand new episode to delight your brain juices. In the meantime, the best way to support us is to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast streaming platform. You can keep up with us during the week on Instagram at The Bar is Ankle High. And if you want even more ankle high hot takes in your life, and you have a few dollars to spare, you can consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/thebarIsAnkleHigh. We have bonus episodes there. We also do monthly horoscopes. And once we get 100 Patreon subscribers, every single one of our Patreons will be getting an exclusive Patreon-only sticker in the mail. And our Limbo Champion subscribers get ad-free episodes. So if you hate listening to ads, that's the one for you. In the meantime, remember to be kind to yourself, because the bar is ankle